Welcome to the Inside Story. Today we are talking all about Israel, what is going on in the Jewish state after the Hamas terror attack, and I am joined by Jeannie Law. How you doing today, Jeannie?
Hey, Billy. I'm doing well. Thank you.
You have been looking at this, and I have been too, from different angles. And obviously, horrific what happened on October 7th in Israel. At
Mm.
least 1,400 people killed. You have almost 200 hostages, and just reverberations of horror throughout the world, not just throughout Israel. And as we're watching this, there are so many questions that have come up about prophecy and what we see in scripture and what is going on now. And you have done a number of interviews, and I want to just sort of talk through some of this because I think it's fascinating and it speaks to some of the things people want to know about, right? When it comes to prophecy.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just start. Let's start with your first interview that you did here with a former IDF captain. His name is Jair Levy. What did he have to say about everything we're watching unfold right now?
Yeah. So interesting enough, he's an Orthodox Jew, so he's not a Christian. And I definitely love to hear from them what they think about the biblical timeline. And so I did ask him that question: where did he think it what we were? And he also said, "Listen, the time is near. The end is drawing near. Just from what Israel knows in prophecy, Ezekiel 38 is that when the end is near, that Israel will be surrounded by their enemies and they'll be closed in on, and that's exactly what's coming into play. It's not fully in play. My next interview with someone else actually kind of clarified that a little bit, but he brought light to that. He said, "Look, something is going on, and for sure Israel's enemies are starting to really form to try to annihilate the Jewish people." And he looked at that as something on the timeline. It was great to hear from him because he's a former IDF captain, so he understands how the military works and how they think. He found it bizarre that it was possible for an infiltration the way it was. He didn't elaborate on that, but we know that Israel is like a fortress of protection. So it was very interesting for them to just be infiltrated the way they were.
Yeah, that there's so many things there to unpack. I think the first, yes, totally bizarre. And I know there are going to be a lot of questions. Right now Israel's focused on how they're going to respond, how they're going to stop Hamas, but I think the big questions of how did this happen, those are going to come at some point and they're going to have to be answered, right? Because people are going to want to know. They already do want to know how the defenses were down to a point where this was able to happen. But getting back to the prophetic pieces of it, it is really interesting talking to Jewish people who see some of the same, end times prophecies that Christians see in the Old Testament. And when you talk about Ezekiel, there are different ideas, and I'm actually really interested to hear what your other guest said, because one of the notions that I've heard is, okay, well, Israel's surrounded by their enemies, but there's going to be a time of peace, right, before this other invasion, the Gog and Magog invasion that you see
Yeah.
happening in Ezekiel as well. And so, anyway, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I think it's interesting the different ideas that surround this. But I think the point is we are watching these, chess pieces sort of line up, right, to the checkmate moment, and who knows when that is. But it
Mhm.
is kind of bizarre to see some of this happening. Now, you also interviewed Amir Safari about this same topic, and he's a believer, he's a Christian. So what did he have to say on it?
Yeah, he is a believer. He talked about Ezekiel 28 and 29 being the end times battle that's spoken of in scripture. And he said right now he doesn't see that being the case because um, a number of things would have to be in play, and one of them would be America also turning their back on Israel. And so far, what we see is Biden giving his full support on of course, the wings of humanitarian efforts being provided. But he said where he believes we are in the biblical timeline is similar to what Psalm 120 says, where it says, "When I say peace, they are for war. The people that dwell around me don't want peace, they want war." That's what Tisfari said. He really emphasized the kind of even the spiritual dynamic to this infiltration and this war and Hamas attack. He called it satanic. He said these people are not even animals. That's a compliment. He said they are straight satanic. It's worse than animalistic behavior when someone rips a child out of a mother's womb after raping her, cutting her womb open with a knife, taking the baby out, and killing both. So he described things like that, which was very hard to hear, but very tangible to understand. Um, he knows that out of the north, um, the Iranian, the people there from Iran and Syria and all of that would have to come into play for the end times to happen, and that's kind of what he said. Concerning that. He thinks that we are in the birthing pains of it. He doesn't think that we have fully, entered into that.
If you live in the United States, you know that our country has a problem that seems to go forever unsolved, and it's affecting 60% of Americans. It's the cost of health insurance. Year after year, it just keeps going up and up. But there is a solution. It's called Medishare, the most trusted name in healthcare sharing. With a 98% customer satisfaction rating, their members love being part of an authentic Christian community. If this is your first time hearing about Medishare, they are an affordable Christian alternative to health insurance that could be saving your family hundreds of dollars every single month. Plus, telehealth and telebehavioral counseling are included with every membership. How amazing is that? And since it's open enrollment season, that means right now is the best time to make the switch. To learn more about Medishare, check out medishare.com/Christian Post now to see how much you could save every month. That's medishare.com/Christian Post. You can also click the link in this episode's show notes. It's so easy, it literally takes 2 minutes to calculate your cost savings when compared to your current health insurance provider. Again, that's medishare.com/Christian Post, or you can click the link in this episode's description. Our thanks to Medishare for sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, that's where this gets really interesting, right? Because so many people have so many different ideas, but that was the general sense that I received in interviews talking with people this week as well, was that this is clearly lining up some pieces, but we just don't know where it goes next. It's obviously a very concerning situation because one wrong move and you can have a much bigger conflict, right? That extends throughout the region and even beyond. We already have, America's already mobilizing in some ways, right, to sort of bolster the protection of Israel. And so you've got a lot of key players in this. And some of those key players are, they're scary countries. They're scary regimes. And so, watching all of this, I mean, some of the things you just detailed, the story about the pregnant woman being murdered and ripped open and her baby being stabbed. I mean, these are things that are so, I would have to agree with him, so unimaginably horrific. They're so demonic and evil that you look at it and you say that, that's just otherworldly, right? It's just not something I can even process.
Yeah, one of the thing they both did, and they come from different belief systems. Both Israeli. They both warned that if the issue isn't taken care of, then this will go beyond Israel. And I thought that was interesting. They were both emphatic about it. They just knew that Israel is the beginning, but it wouldn't be the end. And that is just something to think about, pray about, and really ask the Lord where what do we do in these scenarios, in these situations.
Yeah, no, and that's what we need to all be doing is praying right now. Yeah, I wanted to ask you too. You went to Israel earlier this year, actually, right? You took a trip there.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. It was so chilling for me to see footage of people murdered on the streets. Streets that reminded me of streets that I'd walked down. And obviously, I didn't go to the Gaza Strip. It's actually very discouraged to do that because of just all the tensions there. But just to see the same streets and see bodies of innocent people, it was chilling to my core. And, I even thanked God for allowing me to go there before the war because I don't know if we'd even have the chance to after, knowing where this thing could go.
Yeah, that's something I've thought about a lot with this going on is after this is said and done, this particular iteration of this battle, this never-ending battle between Israel and her neighbors, how many people are going to be willing to go as often? And it's going to have a big impact on the willingness of Americans. Because look, the argument was always Israel's safe. If you're inside, like, you're never going to have to worry about anything like that happening. It's so secure. But I think that's been obliterated by this instance, right? And so it's going to have an impact, I think, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. The fact that civilians were the way they were just invaded, kidnapped, and some decapitated. There's no way that anybody would just be so open to go there right now, because you do have to take caution. I do. I loved the Holy Land. There was something so special about being there. My husband even said to me, if they allowed other people to enlist, I probably would go and enlist for the reserves. And I thought, are you crazy? No, but there is something about the land that calls the people to it. And something that I thought was absolutely fascinating. Russia, for instance, Putin declares war. People are trying to leave Russia, they're not trying to fight the war. Israel declares war. Hundreds of thousands of people have flown back home to enlist in the war. There's something about the land that is special. It calls people to it. It does lead people to it. So I don't know. Maybe there's a bunch of crazy people like me and my husband that'll think of going back even after all this.
Well, I appreciate you breaking this all down for us. There's a lot here, and obviously, you can only get into so much in our short show here. But I would encourage people to head over to Christian Post and read the interviews, and watch the interviews that you've done here because they're powerful and they give a lens into what could be happening and what we might see happen in the near or distant future. So, Jeannie, as always, it was great having you on.
Thank you, Billy. I also do encourage people to read the stories or go watch the videos because I asked some of the questions that I think we're all wondering about. What's the history of this conflict? What side should Christians be on? Killing in any aspect is wrong, right? And I was able to ask some of these tough questions that I think most people are thinking about. So I think it'll be informative for sure.
Well, appreciate your time as always. Everyone else, make sure you tune in next week for another episode of The Inside Story and head over to ChristianPost.com for more of the news you need to hear. We'll see you again next week.